What a nerd. Watching a baby show. Actually, that's a common misconception. What? What? Thomas and Friends is actually a super complex form of telling even more complex stories to kids and adults alike while keeping the world as accurate to real life as possible. Well, minus the talking trains. What? Hey there, y'all skis, and happy 80th anniversary to the Railway series. And dadgum! 80 years later and people are still talking about something? That's pretty sick. Well, sometimes. In this case, it is, but anyway. And while most people who are celebrating this by telling their story on how they became a Thomas fan, there's a good chance theirs is a more personal story. Like, maybe they discovered the show when they were going through a tough time, maybe the show helped them understand the world a little better, or maybe they watched it growing up and still like it as an adult routine. I guess I did discover the show while going through a tough time, but that's not how I became a Thomas fan. I became a Thomas fan in an absurd and kind of ish dumb way. So, this is the absurd way I became a Thomas fan. Thomas and Friends was a show that I always knew existed, but I didn't really care about it. But I think it's worth mentioning that the time period I grew up in was during the Miller era. Yes, the Miller era. My brother really liked the show at the time, but I'm pretty sure that's only because he was the age that the Miller era was literally directed towards. Long story short, I always found the show really repetitive and boring. Gee, I wonder if that has to do with the fact that that's what the Miller era was known for. I also watched Thomas and the Magic Railroad at one point as a kid, but it must have been a pretty long time ago, since I barely remember anything from it, except for Diesel 10 tearing down the scaffolding at Tidmouth Sheds. And of course, Thomas and the Magic Railroad is pretty darn bad. But I do still have some good memories regarding Thomas that I didn't forget. I still vividly remember dragging my brother's toy Toby across a train table my dad built, smashing bash and dash into walls, which of course is always a very good decision. And my personal favorite memory, Blue Mountain Mystery. Holy crap. Blue Mountain Mystery was the only piece of Thomas content that I would willingly watch as a kid. I just loved it so much. I'm still convinced no one rented it from the library as much as we did. I loved Luke, I loved Victor, I loved the music, and not to mention that plot twist was crazy. And to this day, Blue Mountain Mystery is probably my favorite Thomas movie. And I think it was 2016 when I decided to just walk away from Thomas entirely. And the only new Thomas thing I remember watching was King of the Railway, and it was okay, I guess. Then I think it was the late 20-teens or early 2020s when I heard that Thomas was being rebooted into something called All Engines Go, which kind of solidified my belief at that point that Thomas was nothing more than another kid's show. But that didn't last long. Okay, I was trying to be all dramatic, but no, that sucked. Anyway, fast forward to 2024, and I watched an animated short called The Brave Locomotive. A short film I absolutely loved to death. I loved the art style, I loved the animation, and the music, and of course the story was absolutely phenomenal as well. And I never say phenomenal. But after I watched The Brave Locomotive, I got a bunch of Thomas the Tank Engine stuff in my recommended. And I was like, well, that's lame. I don't want a bunch of little kid stuff in my recommended. But then I realized, 90% of these videos weren't even made by kids, nor did they seem like they were made for kids. I don't mean that they were inappropriate or anything, but they just didn't seem like things kids would be interested in watching. So I ended up watching some of these videos because I wanted to understand what in the world was so intriguing about a talking show about trains. A show about talking trains. So in January of this year, aka 2025, I decided to dare myself to make it through the first 3 Thomas episodes. And it was even going to be a YouTube video, a reaction video nonetheless. So I put on the very first Thomas episode, started recording, and probably a whopping 15 seconds in, I was already hooked. The first thing that really caught my attention was the score. One of the first things I take note of in my mind when I watch something new is the music, and it definitely can affect how I overall like something. And yeah, the score was absolutely amazing. Second thing I noticed, well, technically second and third, I thought the models and the set design were all really cool. And the fourth thing, the cinematography was nothing short of peak. But because I was hooked almost instantaneously, I didn't really react too much throughout the video because I wanted to pay attention to what was happening in the show. The only time I actually reacted to it was at the end of the 3rd episode when Henry was walled up in the tunnel. That evening, I was about to edit my video, but then LumaFusion, my editing software, absolutely just decided to break. So I was like, well, I really enjoyed watching those 3 Thomas episodes. Why don't I watch another one? and I ended up watching the entire first season that night. I just thought this show was so well made, and I absolutely love the characters. So from then on, I decided to binge the entire series in order, including the movies. However, I didn't make it through Misty Island Rescue and Calling All Engines, but from what I've heard, those aren't even worth it. And I don't think I've watched The Great Discovery yet either. I started watching from the classic series, which was absolutely amazing, the Hit era, which was mid at best, then the Miller era, which absolutely sucked, and then the Brenner era, where it got really good, and the Bubba era. Disgusting! I actually only watched a small handful of episodes of Bubba because it's just so bad. And I only watched the first episode of AEG and I was like,
nope.
But then LumaFusion started working again and I literally deleted the video because I thought it wasn't really a proper reaction video. So I just made a rant video about Edward Strikes Out, but literally the next day, I watched the episodes A Shed for Edward and Forever and Ever.
Topham Hat says I can stay in the sheds in Vickerstown from now on.
What?
Two absolutely disgusting episodes that are my least favorite as of currently. Something also really interesting about the Thomas the Tank Engine fandom is there's so many insanely creative storytellers and people in general. Like, two of my favorite pieces of content that are just on YouTube alone that came from the Thomas fandom were The Jury and The Token, which maybe I'll even do reviews on someday because holy crap, they were good. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say regarding the absurd way I became a Thomas fan. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and with that, it's been real. Oh, and happy 80 years of existence to the Little Blue Tank Engine. Wait, how old is Thomas? Is he 8?